in the Eurozone, European.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it hits land, that's what it would do. It would wipe out. Now, the last one that hit was the one in Siberia that hit in 1908, and it hit up in Siberia. There weren't many people living there, but we still can see the effects of it because it just, all the trees fell down. I mean, you can tell that something hit, and there was a huge explosion because all the trees around it, the size of the state of the country of Luxembourg, are all flat. I mean, the whole landscape is flat.
Yeah.
So that's what it would do. Of course, if it hit near a population center, that would be a disaster. But it would be worse if it hits in the ocean. And the reason it would be worse if it hits in the ocean is because, one, it would cause a tsunami probably.
Right.
And depending on where it hit, there would be coastlines that would be wiped out. But the impact would actually cause water vapor to go into the air. I mean, there's so much kinetic energy. This thing is 197 feet long, or 79 feet long.
Yeah, so
it's huge. And there would be enough kinetic energy, even if it broke in two.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And then we might have an impact winter.
Exactly.
An impact winter would mean that there would the amount
no
of
crops.
UV.
Yeah, very high energy, ultraviolet light, and it would be dangerous during the day especially. Plus, we'd have a failure of all crops around the world.
Well, not only that, you'd have incessant rains. You'd have major flooding all over.
Wow.
Yeah.
We know what that's like in California. We have mudslides. We have Chris Harris here and
good.
and Robert Felix. Chris, I understand you gave us a little bit of updates. To give us the latest, I've got the emails here that'll be posted up right after the show. You have a couple of reports about the 20 senior officials from the Korean hydronuclear power arrested for corruption. You've got an updated report on issue what's going on with Fukushima. In terms of the lots of things going on, can you give us the kind of the summary of what's happening and how serious it is?
Okay, station blackout is one of the major things that did Fukushima, and it turns out that in Korea, one of the largest plants in the world is the Quarry Unit 1, had actually for 12 minutes a real station blackout where their diesels were not working and the off-site power didn't work. And recently, that was in January of this year. And there was a big management cover-up, and now it looks like these managers, I can't remember whether it's 13 or 16 of them are being sent to prison over that, and that's exactly what needs to happen.
Yeah, the Koreans are much more serious in terms of taking this seriously than the Japanese. They've got radiation detectors in the fish counters in their grocery stores. They're not messing around with this at all, are they?
No, it seems like, but I was kind of surprised, shocked, and I'm really dismayed that the industry is lacking. We talk about the adult leadership and the lack thereof, and the regulator, you can't count on them to do anything more.
Well, we haven't heard we haven't heard more than eyewash from the replacement of JASCO. Who's the new regulator for the nuclear industry? What's her name?
McFarlane,
yeah, she's apparently a geologist, and from what I hear so far, there's no rule making, there's no kind of cracking the whip, nothing's happened. JASCO is trying to actually crack the whip that you can't restart these reactors, you have to move and turn off reactors, have better backup power systems, and deal with extreme weather. They're not prepared for anything. If we have extreme weather this year, which we now expect to be a very extreme summer for very, very crazy weather with the heat we've had the last few weeks across America, we're likely to see many tornadoes and extreme weather. They're likely to cause more station blackouts, more flooding, more danger to our nuclear facilities across America.
Yeah, one word on McFarlane. The word is happy days are here again. I think JASCO was more like a real scientist, and he was trying to do something. And if the industry wasn't going to take care of us, I'd rather we take care of ourselves, to be honest with you. I don't want to have a regular, I don't like police looking at me. I don't like that. Right. I want to be able to be mature enough to handle it and step up to the plate and be adult about it and handle it ourselves. But so now that's what happens when you got somebody up there who's trying to whip them into shape, and now it looks like that's what happens. You get ousted. So
right.
Well, let's see what happens.
What else is happening? And Robert, Felix, what else is happening in terms of the ice age that's happening? We're seeing crop failures everywhere, Argentina and Chile and Peru. We're seeing now crop failures of the corn in America, extreme drought, extreme heat now across the Soviet Union, still called Soviet Union because as far as I'm concerned it never ended, and Russia and all these other countries of the Eastern Bloc. Things are really not good. I mean, the second largest wheat producer, Russia, is going to have a major destruction of their crop if everything continues the way it is now this summer. What's happening?
Well, a big one that I'm not seeing in the United States media, but what it has been published overseas, there's a new finding out that the Earth has been cooling for the last 2,000 years. And it just thoroughly debunks the claim that the temperatures on the planet today are any way historic or unprecedented. This is a study that was a new study of tree ring data, and they have taken measurements back to 138 BC, and they show that the Earth is slowly cooling. And I have a graph on my website showing that downward trend for the last 2,000 years. This particular graph shows the Roman warm period when it was warmer than it is today. It shows a migration period when it was colder, and so that people migrated. Then it shows the medieval warm period, and it shows a little ice age, and it shows today. And it's just, you can just see that trend line going down and down and down. But the United States media is just not reporting on that. Some of the other things that I've got, Arctic supply ships today are stuck in what the Alaska Dispatch calls brutal Bering Sea ice. Now that's another one that you probably haven't heard of lately, but it just came out that the ice is so thick that it's closing in around the icebreakers before other ships can follow. So these brutal sea ice conditions that Northwest Alaska battled all winter. I know that southern, the mainland United States, the continental United States has been warmer, but Alaska, we got to remember, Alaska is part of the United States, and these resupply ships. I mean, this is the middle of July, and the Canadian icebreakers aren't able to keep up with it.
Yeah, in fact, I was watching some of these shows that are on the Discovery channels and History channels about the Arctic ice and for buy a couple of rabbits as pets for your kids this year and learn how to set up a rabbit hutch or a worm farm. Be prepared to move into the basement and spare room if your impact winter comes. People don't realize that climate change is something that the government expects to happen, and they're trying to get their New World Order and their global control grid in place long before all hell breaks loose. That's why they're in such a panic.
That was not humorous.
I know that. I know it wasn't humorous. I know it was a real suggestion, but I wanted to kind of put a little spin on it to make it look like it's humorous. But in fact, people say, well, why do you do this last hour on Fridays and talk about horrifying things like you're talking about all the wellness and everything? Look, if you're taking nutraceuticals like a radiation protocol, you're taking nutraceuticals to protect yourself, you've got your food, you've got ageless life support, glycemics, and NutriComplete, you're ready with your water and your guns and everything, you're going to be fine. Most likely what we're going to have is something where the power grid gets knocked out, a good portion of the population goes crazy, we'll have civil defense by our militia, will finally get our act together, people will be deputized by the hundreds of thousands, say here in California, and every city and town, and I know this from working with the government, within 4 to 12 days will be completely controlled by either gangs or civil militia. The military is not even part of the equation. They're going to be protecting the powers that be in a continuity government because they're such a tiny force compared to the size of our actual armed population. There's enough military armaments and power in the civilian population of the United States that if they assembled every army of every nation on earth, they could not take on the American public. That's a fact. And the fact is that only the American public could defend itself from gangs armed to the teeth because there are so many of them. When I was in Denver back in the late 90s, and up to 2004 when I lived there, we had over 2,200 gangs just in a little city like Denver, which is 2.6 million people. I live in Southern California where we have 26 million people, 10 times that population. And you can take that number and add at least one more zero, so around 22,000 gangs. And some of these gangs are not little gangs, they're big gangs too. And they're armed to the teeth. Many of them have military skills, high-speed motorcycles, all kinds of weapon systems and tactics. They've often are ex-military. People need to be prepared for the fact that real things are going to happen, whether they like it or not. And something as simple as the power went out. I remember talking to people at the local Albertsons September 8th last year, and people were having fist fights in the aisles fighting for ice so their food wouldn't rot in their house. Well, we've got a 20-kilowatt generator. I'm putting on lithium pyrophosphate batteries. We're going to have more experts talking on the show regarding that. You want to have alternative water recovery. I put a water recovery system on our roof for recovering water. If you have the ability to put in a well, put in a well. Be prepared to also have extra so you can help your neighbors and friends and inspire them to have self-protection, have guns, have other non-gun things so they can protect themselves, and have skill sets so they know what to do to protect themselves and to grow food. I happen to be out in the country in North County, San Diego, but I tell people, if you're in a big city, get the heck out now. Move. Do not be in any big city from this point onward. If you have to move so many miles out and try and commute in, do it. But do not live in any big city. Live on the outskirts. Live close enough you can get yourself out of there. And if things look really bad, you have to have a plan to be able to bug out long distance. Right now, to me, my bug out is here. I don't plan on bugging out further. I believe that we're far enough away from anything that if anybody tries to cause trouble, we have so many Marines per square yard here in North County, San Diego. We have a standing army here. So, your comments, Ann?
Yeah, well, what I was saying was that if this asteroid 2012 DA-14 were to hit, and if the impact were great enough, then we might have what they call an impact winter. And in that case, you won't have UV coming down to the earth. You won't be able to grow food and put in a system of UV lights and get a couple of rabbits of the right genders. And don't tell the pet store owner what you're doing, because you may end up slaughtering these animals just to survive. And then the worms go underneath the rabbits, and the rabbit droppings are not so, they're not as odoriferous, and the worms will eat them and turn them into soil. So what you do is you have a worm pen underneath the rabbit pen, and you can set that up in a spare bedroom. And then you let them mate, and then you would have constant, at least, meat for a while. You'd have to have a UV light on them.
Yeah. Now, people need to understand that what's going on in Japan is there's a major burp radiation that's coming here, and I've got a report that 5 out of 7 Fukushima babies born have birth defects, Down syndrome, or miscarried.
Yeah.
And people don't understand.
I read that too,
Yeah. People need to understand that. Now, you're a nuclear expert, Chris, and you see this happening. I've been trying for now a month to chase Senator Wyden's assistant, Mary Gautreaux, and I can give that phone number if people want to get to contact her. Her number is 503-326-7525, and you need to harass her, too, to say, contact Dr. Deagle. I'm the keynote speaker now for the Academy of Environmental Medicine, first week in October in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm going to present to the Academy the data of what's going on and what's likely to happen. This is the biggest environmental disaster, and it's on top of the Macondo British Petroleum disaster, which also has Corexit 9500 with petroleum distillates to dissolve the myelin sheaths and membranes, cause neurotransmitter problems and cortical atrophy in people. The combination of radiation toxicity with cesium, which also causes toxicity to the brain, seizures, and neural decay. And when you put oxidative stress, you basically make people decorticate and decerebrate, affecting the higher metabolic areas of the frontal lobes first and the areas of the association cortex for speech and language and communication. So we're going to start seeing much more bizarre behavior as the radiation level gets higher, and the amount of birth defects is going to go right through the ceiling.
But let me just bring up Unit 4, Fukushima Spent Fuel Pool, if I can, just for a minute. They are trying to, they announced it today that they're going to try to move some of the fuel. They are concerned about the seawater. Remember we talked about salt water and the corrosive effects.
It's decorrosing it, yeah.
And, whether they listen to us or we were just thinking the same lines, now they've stepped up their efforts to try to remove the fuel, and they're going to take a test run on it, put it into a container. I'd love to see what this container looks like, because if it's any of the hotter, newer fuel assembly, it's going to need some sort of a coolant in it. And they're going to use 2 cranes, and they're going to somehow coordinate this particular pick. It's a move. We call it a pick. To pick it up. But they need to move this to another storage facility, and they're very concerned about what the salt water has been doing to this and whether they can actually even put it in a larger pool. Remember, they also have that waste reprocessing facility. So, you know, this is going to be a pretty arduous task. And,
these fuel rod pellets are inside of bundle arrays. And if the fuel rod pellets have agglomerated and the bundle arrays have actually been twisted by the debris and the things that have happened there, they're not likely to come out smoothly, which means they're going to either fall apart because of neutron annealing, or they're actually so bent that they're not going to come out as a single bundle array, and you may end up having to take out huge chunks of these altogether. So it's a great big mess. This is not like taking normal fuel rod assemblies out by just popping them out and then sticking them in another area. And they're concerned that if this goes, it's going to pop. And the fact is they lost the non-interruptible power supply. It's virtual guarantee that sometime this seal, and you talked about this in several reports they took this show and they brought it over when I was gone on the 14th of June and again on the 21st on E&E News, and they put the audio up. But I want you to repeat this, Chris, so people really grasp it. When the seal goes in that reactor, no amount of pumping or uninterruptible power supplies or anything will stop it from them going critical. And then when those fuel rod assembly bundles go, the minimum radiation, and you quoted this back, I think it's, what was the name of the scientist in April that reported it? Was
Dr. Gailey?
Dr. Gailey, and he reported, and we have that report posted up in the PDF. Gailey's report showed that the radiation level will be 30 to 100 times more if only 10% of these fuel rod assemblies blow their cork. So we're dealing with a radiation release that's so massive.
The Hawk on Survive and Thrive Network. It is 7/12/12 Thursday night. For those out there who cannot see that anything wrong is going on, I don't know where you're at. I always remember somebody used to tell me, you know, when I see that live on CNN or on Fox News or MSNBC, then I might consider believing you. Well, I'll tell you what, all you got to do is listen to Fox News or CNBC or any of the things that you're talking about. Now, what's interesting is I happened to just flip open the Bible, and it comes to chapter 3 of 2 Peter, and it says, this second epistle, beloved, I now write unto you, in both which I stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance, that ye may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets, and of the commandment of us, the apostles of the Lord and Savior, knowing this first, and that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of that, by the words of God, the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. But the heavens and earth, which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. But, beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and that 1,000 years as one day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also, and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, 2 Peter chapter 3. And I'll tell you something, I turned right to that. So I always ask Lord Jesus to try to put the words in my mouth before I come on this radio broadcast, if possible. And I will not say that every word that comes out of this old mouth is his, because it would be incorrect. But I'm just trying to pray that he does put as much into my mouth to give to you as possible. Well, this one, I guarantee you, came right from him through the Spirit, because that is one that I haven't paid much attention to. You know, I mean, it's an excellent one. And it says it so germane. 2 Peter chapter 3. You might want to pull that one up and take a look at that in the old King James. And consequently, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you, I did watch a little bit of the TV today. I was watching Camuto on Fox. And it struck me that was very interesting. There was a state treasurer of the state of Colorado. A guy named Walker Stapleton was on there. And he was exhorting people. He's saying, man, he says, you know, the amount of debt that the United States has is worse than Greece per capita. It's worse than Greece, worse than Italy, worse than Ireland, worse than any of the ones that are the so-called ones going under. Consequently, he says it's happening here now. And this is one of the things that he said, is that what's going to happen, of course, Cabuto is Mr., ho-hum, and he's making a bunch and lives in Jersey kind of a thing, and he's just a measured, very measured and all that. But basically, the Colorado State Treasurer says that we're going to be moving to hyperinflation. Or Greg Evenson talking about such. This is the treasurer of the state of Colorado. And then you had a guy on Harrington Capital came on after that. And Cavuto then says, well, if it's all so bad and everything is going so badly in the U.S., which it is, ladies and gentlemen, in California, the richest state with everything, all kinds of people, tremendous resources. For years, it was the 6th or the 7th largest economy in the world by itself. And now you got, Mammoth Lakes, Stockton, San Bernardino going bankrupt. You remember Meredith Whitney 2 years ago, 3 years ago, said there was going to be all kind of bankruptcies that would start to take place in terms of municipalities and in terms of states. We now know that California is in that position in total. We also know that Detroit, certain towns in Rhode Island, certain towns in Texas, Illinois, the state of Illinois is bankrupt. Of course, now they're not going to mention it too much during the time of an election. But when you have all these other people saying, well, we ain't bankrupt yet, but we're going to turn off all the lights, street lights, and we're not going to send cop cars or fire department into those neighborhoods that nobody lives in anymore because it's just all houses that nobody wants to buy, and they're just all trashed out in Detroit. I mean, it's just, they might as well have, whatchamajigger, what's the night the Devil's Night, the night before Halloween, when they set all the fires and go wild up there, And then in order to shut that down, I remember back in the old days, back in the 60s and 70s, when Devil's Night first started to really go wild in Detroit, they used to open up the police lockers of all the drug evidence and all the stuff, and rather than the cops deal it, on the street, they would just flood it onto the street on the cheap with any means possible, and then Devil's Night would cool completely out, and then now I think they try to do that before it even occurs. Just flood it all with dope. Get them all high. Get them all mellowed out, Of course, now They just might as well give them all bath salts, and everybody could go around in every big city eating their neighbor's face off. Ladies and gentlemen, this is raining cats and dogs, you know. This is like frogs coming up from your toilet drain. This is like, you know, this is like weird end-time stuff that you could not make up, and it's sitting right there on Fox News. The Harrington Capital guy, when Cavuto said, well, where should we invest our money? The Harrington Capital guy, a big Harrington Capital, big, you know, stock and bonds and, you know, all the different stuff. He said there's only one really couple places you can put it in, but he said the major place to put it in is precious metals, like gold. He said that's the one place to do it. And Cavuto even mentioned about keeping it in your mattress. And then the other place he said was like Chile, because Chile had paid off a large portion of its debt, and that Chile was on the upswing, and its economy is booming and growing. So he said, the Harrington Capital head guy says, you may want to get your money out of the United States so you could have access to it outside of the U.S., and Chile would be a good place to do that. Do you get the picture? Get your money out of these banks. Get your money out of these brokerage accounts. Get it out of there. Turn it into something you can eat. Turn it into medical supplies. Turn it into gold, into silver to protect it. Turn it into firearms and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Turn it into NBC gear, nuclear, biological, chemical protection. Turn it into medical supplies. Turn it into colloidal silver, meso silver. Old Frankie Keys will fix you up. Turn it into inner food. Turn it into 40-day, 40-night pails of food. Do it, and do it now, because this stuff is getting ready to happen. You think it's getting ready? It is happening. I make the mistake sometimes, oh, this stuff's coming. Well, here, read what old V had to say today on SteveQuail.com. Here comes the hit. July 12th, what do you think was the main purpose behind the aptly named MF Global? What do you think is the connection to PFG Best? PFG Best is this commodity group that supposedly had $220 million, and then they find out they've only got, you know, just a small token of that and all of that. He says, why is the J.P. Morgan connected to both commodity houses? Simple. This is how you start the metals beatdown that I've been screaming about for the past 2 years. It struck me this afternoon, and after doing some digging and making a few calls, see, he's in Europe when he wrote this to Steve, so they're ahead 8-10 hours wherever he was at. He said the answer stood right in front of me. When MF Global went bust, over $2 billion in customer funds magically vanished. What happened next? Question mark. Gold and silver took a hit. Now, PFG Best magically loses $250 million. What happened next? Question mark. The gold mark took a 1.3% dive. The kicker is this. Both failed firms. Both have money sitting in whose accounts? Why, J.P. Morgan, of course, is where the money's at. And who are they, the clearing bank for? Why, the good old boys at the Federal Reserve. Now, what does the Fed and J.P. Morgan have in common? Well, among many things, the abject manipulation in the gold and silver market. So what does this mean? That the PFG Best failure and more shell brokerage failures, as they are all doing the dirty work at J.P. Morgan, are causing all the weak hands, to dump gold, silver, and other commodities. The result, a hit to gold that I'm going to say may drop the price from my previous claims down to $1,200, $1,400 range. In other words, for those of you out there right now sitting on the fence, buy, and buy. This is the time to do it. This seems to be part of the last moves of survival that banks like J.P. Morgan and the central banks are doing on top of all of the hacks and IR swaps, the hacks, where they're hacking into accounts and taking the money. How of the bank accounts. The old trap door, the old software, that was invented in St. Louis, then stolen by one of the attorney generals of the United States. Oh, man. Who worked for Reagan. Promise, Promis software, Promise software. It's a type of software where you can manage and manipulate and track things, large numbers of things, and track them down through every kind of thing on the entire net, through all financial transactions. You can track court dates. You can track certain people and how they appear in this place, that place, the other place. You could use it to track anything. There also were back doors built into it that, if you remember, in the 90s, that the guys who called themselves the fifth column, in quotes, the retired good U.S. intelligence officers who were driving around. The old Silver Fox out of Kentucky was one of them. The old Silver Fox used to be Clinton's handler at Oxford University when Clinton was in the CIA there, Billy Boy. And old Silver Fox, who's now in prison on a trumped-up solicitation of murder charge. But he was Silver Fox was shall we say, cherry boy. But on the other hand, him and the other guys used the Promise software backdoors, and they had a Cray research computer that they jury-rigged together and put it on an 18-wheeler with all the big satellite dishes and drove it around to different places. And they were able to get into all of the foreign bank accounts through the trap doors and find all of the dirty money that belonged to the politicians there. And you remember in the 90s, all the Congress people and senators that resigned because they were just tired and they wanted to spend times with their family, or they had a medical issue, or they just no longer wished to serve anymore. They wanted to take time off, or they were outraged at how people had changed. And all of those people, I remember Patsy Schroeder was one of the prominent ones, they said. The guy from Texas used to be on the communications committee. All kind of different people. I remember even Libby Dole having some kind of a deal because old Uncle Bobby Dole allegedly, he didn't take anything himself, but Libby did, because International Red Cross, He had access and reasons to have accounts overseas, etc., because of travel. So I remember all those guys using the Promise software to take it out the back. Well, do you think that they don't have the ability to do that now? So here, back to what B's saying. After he says the result, the hit to gold that I'm going to say the price might drop from my previous claims down to 12 or 1400 range. In other words, for those sitting on the fence, buy, this is the time to do it. And he said before, don't worry about what the spot is right now. Just get the metals. If you want to do that, you call Steve Quayle at 4840. And it seems that he says it seems to be part of the last moves of survival that banks like JPM and the central banks are doing on top of all the hacks and IR swaps and the LIBOR manipulation. That's the London Interbank borrowing route, a rate that so much of our credit and the house loans and car loans and credit cards and all different types of things are based a large portion on what the LIBOR rate is. The full assault on the metals market is on, and it is time to buy. Did you hear that? The full assault on the metals market is on, and it is time to buy. You have to see the clear picture that is coming into focus. IR swaps, LIBOR manipulation, suspicious commodity firm failures are all part of the concerted effort to keep precious metal prices low. I was right again, and you heard it here on this site first. Here it comes, the best buying opportunity you will ever get. V. You can read that, print it off, and you ought to get with it and do it. Call Steve Quayle at 586-4840 if you would like to get some medals. And I'll tell you something. This V is a real person. This V is a high-level banker out of Europe. I know a little more about it, but I don't want to know too much because I will tell you. I know exactly, who they work for, all of that. And if you read the rest of the V's previous, and I suggest that you should read everything that he wrote and sent to Steve, you will get hints and things about it. Just suffice to say, this guy knows exactly what's going on. And you don't think gold is important? Well, look what old Turkey's doing here today. Turkey skirting Iran sanctions. The NATO country, Turkey, who really wants to be the new caliphate, the Turkish Muslim caliphate, Turkey has exchanged nearly 60 tons of gold for several million tons of Iranian crude oil, despite its promises, to uphold Western sanctions on Iran's energy sector, according to recent Turkish reports. By using gold instead of money, Turkey is able to skirt Western sanctions on Iran's oil trade. Well, let me tell you something. Iran would rather have the gold instead of the piece of paper. Particularly those sanctions on Iran's oil trade pertaining to SWIFT, the global money transfer service that until recently assisted the Central Bank of Iran and other Iranian financial institutions. Over the past several months, Turkey has given Iran 60 tons of gold, or more than $3 billion, according to a July 8th report on the Turkish news site Vatan Online. The report was translated by the Open Source Center, a translation service used by the CIA. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh, here's an interesting one. The idea that this is out of the same article, it's by Adam Credo from the Washington Free Beacon. And here's a quote. He says, the idea that Turkey needs a waiver for more time to disconnect itself from the Iran oil trade is ludicrous, said Michael Rubin, a former Pentagon advisor on Iran and Iraq. Turkey is playing Obama for a fool. Well, Mr. Rubin, I would also say to you, we were supposed to pay for the entire Iraqi war out of the profits from the Iraqi oil, if you recall, and now Iraq is sitting there with a huge cash surplus, and we're sitting with huge deficits and a monstrosity over there that's the largest thing in the world in terms of an embassy. So when we talk about that, Turkey's playing Obama for a fool, yeah, but so is the other people who played the games with the Iraqi oil. Like a loose schoolgirl, this is a quote, like a loose schoolgirl, Obama may think he can become popular by giving away the goods to whomever tells him he is the apple of their eye, said Rubin, a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Obama doesn't understand that for regional rulers like Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan and Russian President Vladimir Putin, he has gained not respect but disdain. Yeah, they don't admire weakness. They say you're weak. They would admire strength. Turkey's attempts to skirt Iranian sanctions could lead lawmakers to shape a new round of sanctions. Oh, a new round of sanctions. And the good news, the sanctions are now so powerful that Iran has been forced to follow Ron Paul's advice and move back to the gold standard from the dollar. You see how they write this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, which brings up another story. I said it to Steve this morning. I think he posted it, and Holly posted it up on his site. It's new reporter, artificial intelligence, AI writes the stories. They got an artificial intelligent computer using algorithms to write the stories that push all your buttons and give you guys all the good feel-good stuff. So this stuff is all, it's Skynet writing the news. It's Skynet writing the news. Get your money out of these banks. Get your money out of these brokerage accounts, out of these traders and trickery and Illuminati pawn scum brokers all over the United States. Put it into gold and silver. Put it into food. And I'll tell you what, put it into put it into firearms, and put it into ammunition. Because on July 27th, it certainly seems, it appears, that the Joker Tut is going to sign away. And your Secretary of State has also said, too, they're going to sign away your Second Amendment and give control of the firearms and everything treaties to the United Nations. Is there any wonder why you got Russian troops all over everywhere? Oh, and incidentally, I get to see you 2 days at the end of the week, so I will tell you what I've seen. I've seen several different things. Number one, I think the ethanol train in near Columbus, Ohio, in my opinion. Did you catch that? In my opinion. Did you catch that? My opinion. In my estimation. I believe that's another Spetsnaz gray terror event, just like the fires. And oh, isn't it interesting how we harp on the Russians starting the fires? The FBI goes out there to supposedly investigate. Now we got no information coming out of them, so they were there to sit on the story. But in the meantime, somebody with some good sense has decided they gave gully washers to Colorado and put the fires out. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the time to hide. It's not the time to lay low. This is the time to put on the full armor of God. This is the time to stand and get ready and be prepared to take on all comers on behalf of the Lord Jesus against these evil pond scum SOBs. Do you understand? Do you got ears to hear? This is a watchman who ain't afraid, who's going to tell you the dadgum truth right straight down the pipe. I'll tell you what, there's so much discussion in the intelligence communities. Finally, people are starting to wake up, and they're saying, my golly, what are we doing? We got all these Russians inside the United States, and then here's the stories out of, the Mediterranean. You got Russians everywhere. Russian ships, missile cruisers, submarines, aircraft carriers. You got Russian Moscow Marines. You got them everywhere going on. You got things going on in Canada.